It's now my honor to introduce Leo Marmol. He doesn't really require an introduction. However, I'm going to give him one. He is an FAIA managing partner of the architect-led design-build practice, Marmol Radziner, founded in 1989 with Ron Radziner. Active in his profession, Leo lectures widely on the topics of architecture, sustainability, and restoration, and participates in conferences, symposia, and panel discussion. He has also organized numerous architectural tours, which we have been on many, in Southern California to highlight the region's wealth of mid-century modernist landmarks, many of which you have restored.
Thank you.
And with that, Leo Marmol.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Steve. I'm really very sorry to be here. Thousands of fellow Los Angeles have lost everything. And I've been hearing so many of those stories every day. And each and every one of those stories is unique. And yet there's also a number of things that are consistent with everyone's story. Everyone's doing the math problem. Existing mortgage, available insurance settlement, actual cost of construction. And what everyone is facing, everyone I've spoken to except one, is facing a gap within that math equation and trying to figure out how to fill that gap and whether they can stay as community members in the Pacific Palisades. The other thing that we're seeing consistently is so many people are facing the challenge of hiring architects and builders, and they're doing this for the first time. They don't know the terminology, the language, the process, and it's adding to the trauma of their loss because they're facing something that feels so daunting and overwhelming. And so I'm here in the spirit of just trying to give some clarity as to what that process is, how long it might take, and how much this might all cost. So let's start with some immediate action steps. And let me also say that we've set this up to address people that are at all levels of experience. Zero experience and have never even thought about what an architect does, and those of you who have been developers or working with architects for your entire lifetime, I'm sorry about that. But we're also here to try to give enough detail to try to be helpful to you as well. But let's start with immediate action steps. And we'll get into fire debris cleanup. Steve touched on it a bit. We'll get into that a little bit. But first of all, your April 15th federal and state income tax return, postponed. It's not due till October. Don't worry about your April 15th filing. County assessor, your property taxes. Your property tax bill, as you know, is in two parts: land value and improvements. Your land value is going to stay the same, although you can make an argument that that's not true. But you may contact the county assessor. Please do it right away. And they will move your improvements to zero, which will reduce your tax basis for your next property tax bill, which won't be due until about a year after the fire occurred. So actively, please reduce your property tax burden. Most homeowners have started to collect their information, whatever information you have on the home that you lost. Architectural drawings, photographs, site surveys, title reports, all of it, collect it, and we'll talk a bit later as to why that might be valuable. Most people have started to collect that, and if you've started the opt-in or opt-out process, many of those documents are necessary to fill out that right of entry form anyway. Many have done that. So as Steve said, once the EPA has cleared your site, you have the legal access to your property. But the Army Corps and the county, they're offering a program to you to actively opt into, and they will carry the burden to clear that debris for you. The Army Corps will remove the following items: burned debris, landscape, ash, chimneys, unsupported wall. Basement and foundations, you have a choice. You can direct them to leave the foundation or remove it. For those that have older homes, we suggest that you have them remove it. If you wish to keep it, you're going to have to get it tested. You can hire a structural engineer. They will come out and do on-site testing of the competence of that concrete. The fire was so intense in the Palisades, chances are your foundation has been damaged anyway, even if it was completed last year and would have to be replaced, so have the Army Corps take it out. And as Steve said, we suggest that you opt in to the program. If you opt out, you will still be required to get a demolition permit to remove the debris. You'll have a debris removal permit. Army Corps will take care of that. Opt in, don't worry about debris removal permits. Also, you'd have to hire a general contractor that has a HAZ certification, because as Steve was saying, so much of that debris, even though it's been cleared by the EPA, it is still toxic material and will not be simply loaded into a dump truck and hauled to the nearest dump site. Most of that material has to be specially handled. Opt in. But also know the Army Corps is not going to remove everything. There are some things the Army Corps will not touch. Site retaining walls. Tree stumps. They'll remove the burned trees, but they're going to leave the stump and you'll have to grind it out yourself. Partially damaged structures. Therefore, when we get to the budget, we're going to suggest that you leave some budget for site clearing, miscellaneous site demolition, because as Steve was saying, the site is not going to be perfectly level and ready for new construction. You will still have to do some work. So we want to talk about the approval process. There seems to be some confusion around that, but before we get to that, let me talk about and introduce you to ZEMAS. ZEMAS is an incredibly wonderful gift from the city of Los Angeles that will allow you to type in your address, go to the website, type in your address, and you will receive a painfully detailed breakdown analysis of all the legal parameters around your site. So in relationship to the permit approval process, the most important information you will pull from ZEMAS when it comes to the Pacific Palisades area has to do with the area your parcel is in, defined by the California Coastal Commission. The California Coastal Commission has jurisdiction over much of the Palisades, and therefore you need to understand your area to really assess your permitting options for your property. So these are the various possibilities for your site. About 50% of the Palisades is outside of the jurisdiction of the California Coastal Commission. And you'll be blessed with the coastal zone that says none. Be really happy. You're outside of their reach. The next category of parcels is what's known as parcels and area with a categorical exclusion. It's often referred to as a Cat X parcel. And these are parcels within the jurisdiction of the coastal zone, but the Coastal Commission said, we're not that worried about this parcel. So you're excluded from their concern. The next group of parcels has to do with single permit jurisdiction areas without a Cat X, and then dual jurisdiction without a Cat X. So to really understand your options of permitting, you need to start with an understanding of what area of the coastal zone you're in. Again, this is specific to Pacific Palisades. And then you have some options. The one that's most talked about is the rebuilding less than 110%. And we're going to talk more about that. There's another option, of course, is that you can rebuild greater than 110%. And that will be for two categories, ones that are outside of the coastal zone, and then we'll talk about those that want to build outside of 110% within the dual or single jurisdiction of the coastal zone. So let's start with those that wish to rebuild less than 100% or up to 110%. And again, every area of the coastal zone is available for expedited permitting process. Now, what we're talking about is the governor and the mayor have handed down some edicts that have simplified a number of necessary steps and taken them away so that we can talk about expediting. But so much of this is about setting expectations for what's possible for the Palisades. If anyone thinks the word expediting means fast, we need to reset our expectations. It's not a criticism of the city of Los Angeles, but we have to understand that we're talking about a large bureaucracy with all kinds of steps and systems that have to still be satisfied. They just mean that you are somehow going to be prioritized, and the city's trying to figure out right now how that will work and what that will mean. As Steve said, your ADU, accessory dwelling unit, a state of California law that says you can add another legal building with its own address and its own legal structure to your parcel, even though you're single-family zoned. There's a way to add density into our single-family zoning. You can add an ADU and it doesn't count to the 110% calculation. Basements, however, do count in the calculation. You cannot add a basement. A basement is typically, when you're calculating your available residential floor area, a basement is kind of free square footage, doesn't count. Well, when it comes to the 110% calculation, a basement counts. So you can't add a basement and think that you're not gonna, that you're still gonna work within that 10% flexibility range. Doesn't count. So it means, if you participate with this expedited process, number one, you can retain your existing non-conforming conditions. What the hell does that mean? Let's say, for example, your house was legally built and is now closer to your side yard setback than what the current zone allows. You can replace that square footage. Let's say your existing house was taller than what the code now allows for height limits. You can replace that non-conforming condition. We spoke earlier about collecting all your house information. Well, here's where it really may come in handy. You may have to have your design professional negotiate with the city and prove to them that you had a legal non-conforming condition and you can build your house taller than what the zone allows. Well, your house doesn't exist, so that's where your previous drawings come into play, your previous permits, all the stuff you could collect about your house. Your architect may need to go down and prove to the city that no, you really had a legal non-conforming condition. Let's say you bootlegged some part of your house and it's closer to the allowable setback, cannot put it back. The non-conforming condition had to have been legal when you put that non-conforming condition into place. You have to have had a permit for the building height at the time you built the building. Okay, gas line connection. You can put the gas company will put a gas meter back in. City of Los Angeles has moved to all electric, so today new buildings cannot get a gas permit. Now, solar panels, low impact design, that's
If you had
stormwater
before-
management.
If you had a gas stove before, can you replace it with another gas stove in your new house?
For this program
Yeah.
of up to 110%, yes, you will get your gas meter back and you will get your beloved gas stove back.
But do you have to get rid of it in 2 years when that thing is over?
No, you will keep your gas meter in perpetuity,
Okay.
as they would say.
Thank you.
Solar panel, low impact design, city's still working on this. Chances are this demand will be reduced, but this is the golden ticket that the governor of California gave us all as a gift. You are free of a coastal development permit even if you are within the single and dual jurisdiction areas. So thank you, Governor Newsom. Next slide, please. Okay, let's say hypothetically you wanted to consider building more than 110% of your square footage. Well, if you're not in a coastal zone, you have a categorical exclusion that you saw on ZEMIS, or in that exclusion area, you can consider going over the 110%, and you will not have a major impact to your time. What they're going to call medium fast probably adds about 2 months to your overall building permit. ADU is still possible. One note is every parcel within the city of Los Angeles has a maximum allowable residential floor area. You can't exceed what the code says your maximum house can be. That will still apply. You will not be able to keep non-existing or existing previous non-conforming conditions. They will go away. You will build to the current zoning requirements. You will not get a gas meter. You will be all electric. You will install solar panels. You will install and satisfy all the low impact design criteria, but you still will not have to get a coastal development permit. Again, this does not apply to the two high concern areas of the Palisades. Next slide. And that's this slide. So if you are in the single jurisdiction or dual jurisdiction area of the coastal zone and you want to go more than 110%, full boat, full process, which means, there it is, the dreaded coastal development permit. Right now, that process takes about 2 years. Better than Malibu. That takes 4 to 5 years for a new single-family home. Crazy, right? Welcome to California. So this is the issue. If you are in either of these areas of the Pacific Palisades, we would strongly encourage you to stay within that 110% and do not consider going beyond that. But you still have the right. Why might you want to do that? It's crazy, right? Well, if your allowable square footage on your parcel, let's just make up numbers, is 3,000 square feet. City says your maximum residential floor area is 3,000 square feet, but you lost a home that was 1,000 square feet. Well, it may not make economic sense to build back at 1,100 square feet. Your better long-term value may be to exceed the 110%, build up to the 3,000 square feet, and again, long-term value for the parcel, that might be better. But those are things only you can answer for yourselves. Okay, let's talk about timeline. There's a ton of concern about how long phase 1 and phase 2 is going to take. Don't worry about it. There's plenty to stress about in this process. That's not one of them. Why? Because there's a lot of work you have to do, regardless of how long that takes. I'm not saying take the pressure off the Army Corps or the EPA. Keep the pressure on. But don't sweat it. Don't worry about it. Start your process, and we're going to talk more about this process. Use the time to, more than anything, select your professional team to guide you through the process. Building in the state of California is not a do-it-yourself program. Rebuilding your house is not a DIY YouTube video, because we have made it incredibly complex and difficult. There are many, many challenging steps, and you need guidance as a homeowner. All right, let's get into it. Budgets. Yes, question.
You know, for those, you said this is for people who have never done this before, to the developer type. So for the people who've never done it before, what are you telling them about how do they find a professional? How do they find the architects?
Yeah, we're going to get more to, the question is, how do you find an architect? Great question.
Social media.
Referrals, social media, talk to your friends. The American Institute of Architects, and what we have a link to their site, has reference guides. It's like finding any professional these days. Use your networks, talk to your friends who have hired architects, and get names. Okay, let's get into construction costs, because here lies the real burden of this conversation. Overall construction costs break down into two primary parts. There is hard construction, and that's about building and site, and we'll get into that. And then there's pre-construction cost, soft costs they're often referred to, and those are the professional costs that will set you up to spend the real dollars in hard construction. So let's look in more detail at hard construction. Hard construction also breaks down into two parts. The first part is house cost. The second part is site cost. So let's start with the simpler side of this, site cost. So we've already said the initial debris removal, if you opt in, will be paid for by the state, the county, and the federal government. But as I was saying earlier, you want a line item for the miscellaneous cleanup, because the Army Corps isn't taking everything. So you're going to be left with a little bit of cleanup.
They will take some of your insurance proceeds if you have them.
That's right.
That were dedicated to that portion.
When you opt into the program, you will not directly pay the county for that participation, but if you have debris cleanup as part of your insurance settlement, you will sign over, whatever that amount is, you will sign that over to the government, and they will take those proceeds to help offset the costs. So there's no direct cost, but you will forfeit your insurance payout, which makes sense, right, to pay for that. Okay, other site costs. Oh, let's stay with this for a sec. Miscellaneous site cleanup we talked about. Hardscape, patios, walkways, driveways, gates, fences, all that stuff. Landscape, plants, irrigation, site lighting. There'll be a line item for that. And then any other site features, pools, spas, water features, all of that is going to fall under site costs. So now let's go to the fun one, building costs. The square footage, again, we talked about, that's a decision you will make as to what type of permit process you wish to engage with. So that will fill in your square footage. It's that number there that everyone's struggling with, right? It's the number that there is so much inconsistency and trauma and tension and uncertainty and questions about. Why is that? There's a number of reasons for that. One is not everyone's putting the same thing into that cost per square foot bucket, right? Some architects design the enclosure and the infrastructure, but they don't do kitchens and bathrooms and interior finishes. So they leave that off their cost per square foot. They're giving you a cost per square foot for a piece of the budget. And in that overall budget that I showed earlier, what's not in that budget are interior furnishings and fixtures. So the architect says, oh, that's interior design, it's left off your budget, and suddenly that number is artificially deflated. That number needs to include everything that is permanent to the home. And we're talking about delivery, materials, labor, management, general conditions, general contractors, fees, and contingencies. We'll talk about contingencies in a minute. In other words, for that number to be complete, it should include everything that's necessary short of your moving truck. In other words, everything necessary to get you to be able to move furniture back into your house. If the cabinets, the light fixtures, the countertops are somehow left out of that analysis, you are short. Okay, inconsistency in putting numbers in, is that the whole story? Does that answer the question of why so much trauma around that number? No, there's more. First of all, yes?
Yeah, in the back, it's hard to read the numbers.
Can you see the, I don't want you to see the numbers. The numbers are scary. Can you see the screen above? Right above you?
Okay.
There, try those. And it doesn't matter. We're just talking about how these are set up. Here's the other problem with the cost per square foot. First of all, we have to understand it's an average cost per square foot. The reality of what's happening is your kitchen may be $2,500 a square foot. Your bathrooms maybe are $1,500 a square foot, and I'm making up these numbers. But your den and your bedrooms, those are maybe what? $500, $200 a square foot, significantly less. We are then averaging out the cost per square foot. The problem is that as homes get smaller, the more inefficient that average is, right? Because as homes get bigger, there's more square footage in less expensive costs in the house. You still have one kitchen, however many bathrooms, but what you tend to have more of are bedrooms and dens and rooms that are less cost per square foot. So what happens is, as homes get bigger, they're more efficient in their cost per square foot. And most of the homes that were lost in the Palisades are, in the world of architecture and construction, smaller. So they're inherently less efficient. So we have a problem of inefficiency in that metric. But there's one more problem, and we're all to blame for this. The problem is the way we select builders and architects. And you tend to select them the way you shop for an automobile. That is, you can go to an auto dealer, and if you give them the same spec, the same make, model, and trim, and all the other stuff, 3 dealers, they'll give you 3 prices. That's a fair comparison because you're comparing markup. With the architects and builders, you're not buying a product. You're buying a service. And by asking 3 architects, and you've given them the same spec for the house, right? I want a modern house that blah, blah, blah. And one of them will tell you 1,000, one of them will tell you 800, and one of them will tell you $500 a square foot. And you're gonna say, well, that architect must just be better, more efficient. Often they're naive, or worse, they're lying to you because they're marketing their services and you are encouraging them to lie to you. We have trained our architecture and building professionals to lie to you because you reward them by hiring them for underreporting construction costs.
There's one way to find out who some of those are. Drive in the Palisades and see the signs that are stuck in the ground right now.
Right. And right now, after trauma like this, as a community, we are so vulnerable to hearing what we want to hear. Insurance is giving me $300 a square foot, and I'm going to go out there and search for the company that's willing to tell you right now they can get you back in your house for $300 a square foot. We have to be careful, and you have to do your research. What we're looking for is reality. It's too easy to waltz down this world of make-believe when we're vulnerable and afraid. Yes?
In addition to your P&L, I would suggest financing charges, because money's going to cost you.
Well, so the question is that he was suggesting that we should put into this financing cost. What I am talking about is your project budget. There's a whole world of other costs: financing, legal fees, your temporary housing costs because you're now displaced. There's many other costs. What we're looking at is trying to get an understanding of what the project costs are. But yes, as a homeowner, there's going to be other costs that support this. Okay, let's go to soft costs. So soft costs are all the professionals necessary to spend hard costs. Site surveys, soils engineers, architects, and landscape architects, and we'll talk a bit about how they typically charge for their services. There'll be consulting engineers that need to support the process, civil, structural. Title 24 is a California mandated energy code that has to be satisfied. Reimbursable expenses, blueprints, mailing things, mileage to and from the site, direct expenses by your architect that you will reimburse. And then, of course, local permits and fees. Now, here's something you can start working on. In the Woolsey fire, City of Malibu, and this is pretty typical of Malibu, they waive permit fees. City of LA hasn't said they will do that yet. Get to work, Steve. Get them to waive permit fees for homeowners in the fire.
I would rather pay a permit fee to an outside consultant to keep it out of the city than I would pay no permit fee and have it go through the process. Personally, the de minimis amount for speed.
Yeah, if paying a permit fees means they will truly expedite your project, it's worth every penny. Because it's a small amount in the big picture. Okay, soft costs. So let's talk for a second about contingencies and escalation, because there's confusion around all of these. First of all, let's talk about contingencies. Contingencies are pots of money that haven't been assigned to cover unforeseen costs. There are two types of contingencies: general contractors contingencies and owners contingencies. The general contractors contingency, which is, again, is a pot of money that the general contractor is going to hold for extra unforeseen things, that should already be covered in the hard construction costs. When you work with your general contractor, it's a fair question. How much contingency do you have? Right? You can have that conversation. And they should be able to answer that honestly and with dignity, and help you understand that they have some extra money. Is that wrong of them? Are they trying to hurt you or screw you? No. It's just that the world is imperfect. The bid process to price the project, they're not going to catch everything. They know that. They need some extra money. There will be surprises that they can't come back to you as the owner and say, we're going to charge you some more money because of this surprise. The owner's going to say, you should have known. So they're going to carry a contingency. So the contractor's contingency should be baked into the hard construction costs, and you can ask what that is. Owner's contingency, and that's what I want to talk about. The owner's contingency is, again, a pot of money that you're holding in addition to that scary bottom line on the overall budget. And that's to cover things that arise that are outside of the control of the architect or builder, and those are things like surprises in the earth that no one knew about, some buried chunk of something that has to be taken out, you'll pay for that. A building inspector has a different perspective and adds some electrical outlets or some other thing, and you will pay for that. Changes that you or your design team make along the way, you will pay for that. So you carry a contingency. But let's talk about escalation, because they're going to be related. So cost escalation is the growth in cost over the course of your project. Inflation is a naturally occurring increase of cost. So at minimum, during the course of your project, inflation will increase the cost of your home. But we're facing a unique time here in Los Angeles County. For one thing, as Steve said, we're about to embark on the largest single construction enterprise this region has ever seen. That will place additional burden on the construction industry in terms of labor that's available, in terms of materials that are available. When there's stress on an industry, prices escalate. We will see price escalation in the County of Los Angeles simply because of the scale of this disaster. We're also facing the possibility of US tariffs. We don't know how those are going to impact the cost of lumber from Canada, or the fact that virtually all your building products are made of some kind of metal, whether that's steel or aluminum. We expect that there will be impact from US tariffs. We just don't know what they are yet. We're also facing, as Steve was saying, a kind of unique situation of added burden on our construction labor through our current focus on undocumented workers or undocumented people within our country. So we know there's at least 11 to 18% of individuals within our construction workforce that are undocumented. They face risk of deportation. But as, again, Steve was saying, it's bigger than that. They may be documented, but family members, there's a lot of fear within our labor industry right now. All of that is creating an unstable environmental or financial environment within the construction industry. We would normally tell clients to hold an owner's contingency of 10%. That instability, the extra instability, it's nothing to be afraid of. It's just a condition that we're living right now. The way you hedge against that, the way you protect yourself against that instability, is increase your owner's contingency. We're now suggesting 20 to 25%. So as ugly as that bottom line number was, it's uglier. We're saying hold an extra 20 to 25% because we don't know what's going to be happening in the next number of years around this issue of escalation. That's the problem, is that everything I'm saying is in the context, and I'm talking to people that have lost everything. But we believe it's better to be honest and real about what people are facing so that people can go into this with knowledge and hopefully courage and have reasonable expectations so that we can guide them as an industry through this. It's not going to be easy. None of this is easy. And if you think you know, if that's something you're looking for, those are the people that should sell their properties and move, because this will be a process. And I'm going to tell you the silver lining at the end of this, I promise. So really quickly, let's just get through this. Working with an architect, design, by the way, architects and building designers, architects are licensed by the state of California, and you cannot use the word architect in any form. You make up some word. If the word is derived from the word architect, it's reasonable for you to think that they're licensed, because if they're not, they're breaking the law. There are also building designers, totally legal, and they can do single-family homes. They will have to associate with a structural engineer, but it is totally fine in the state of California. Not all states allow this. Many states require you to hire a licensed architect. Not California. You can hire a building designer. Next slide. Process, and we're just going to touch on this. This is the normal architectural process. Pre-design phase, design phase, you're looking at the big picture, technical drawing phase, construction documents, there's a permitting and bidding phase, we talked a lot about that, and then the architect's work or the building designer's work during construction is referred to as construction administration, the support the architect gives to the builder and the owner to go through the process. That's a kind of very abbreviated description of the steps you will take. Traditional delivery are kind of contract structures. The owner hires, this is the architect. What happened? Oh, there we go. What happened over there? That's so funny. So the owner hires the architect, and the owner hires the general contractor separately. There's no contractual relationship between the architect and the builder, and that was set up by the American Institute of Architects as a checks and balance to protect the owner. And then the next slide shows that there's also this alternative delivery method that's called design build, in which the owner hires one entity that is both responsible for the design and execution of the architecture, as well as the actual construction of the building. So that's an alternative method, both of which have advantages and disadvantages. We're not going to cover it, we don't have time, but certainly we can talk more about this at another time. Next slide. Oh man. Okay, so here it is. The owner will hire land surveyors, specialty consultants, geotech, a general contractor, and an architect. But then the architect will hire sub-consultants, and the general contractor will hire subcontractors. This was laid out in that soft cost analysis that we looked at earlier. But this is a lot. And imagine an owner who just lost everything, has never been through this before, and is facing this. So be kind, be gentle, take your time and help owners understand how this works. But yeah, I know, it's a lot. Next slide. Ways in which architects get paid. There's a number of ways. There's no magic to any of these. There are different ways to assign fees. There's percentage of construction cost, stipulated sum. I'm going to do design, construction documents, and CA for your specific house for X dollars, fixed amount, hourly, or some combination of those. Those are the most typical ways in which you will pay an architect for their services. Next slide. There are a number of different typical contract structures with general contractors. They'll work on a stipulated sum, complete set of documents, they can price it, they will provide everything in those documents for X dollars, a stipulated amount that the general contractor is responsible for. Cost plus a fee. They'll still do that bidding, they'll still give you the cost, but it will be a budget, and you as the owner will pay whatever it actually costs, plus a percentage for their insurance, overhead, and profit. Cost plus a fee. And then there's cost plus a fee with a guaranteed maximum. So they'll do this, but they'll also give you a maximum upset, again, for a specific project with a specific set of construction documents. Next slide. Wow. So that's how our industry's set up. So silver lining, as Steve was saying, overwhelming, no question. So Steve was talking about the fact that the utility infrastructure is going to be rebuilt. Pacific Palisades and Altadena are going to be the only two neighborhoods in the county of Los Angeles that have a robust and current infrastructure backbone, while the rest of the county continues to put Band-Aids on a crumbling, often defective utility infrastructure. In terms of long-term value to your property, that utility infrastructure, if they do it right, and they replace everything that they really have no choice of, the value of that to your property is incredible, and no one else in the county of LA will have that benefit. You also have the opportunity to design a home to meet your current needs. Families change. A lot of the homes that were lost were built at a time when the family composition was different, whether they have more kids or the kids have gone to college. You can design a home that is fit for your lifestyle. You can choose an aesthetic. The city of Los Angeles, even within all those building parameters that they put out for your permitting, they don't care what the house looks like. You have total freedom to design the home to your aesthetic desire. And the home will be built to new standards. Maybe some of the codes and some of the requirements are going to be waived, but your home will meet current code. And for most of the homes that were lost in Pacific Palisades, that means a significant upgrade to the performance of your home from a structural perspective, from an environmental perspective. Heating and cooling bills will be lower. You will have a better home in terms of performance than the home that was lost. Maybe I'm just grasping at straws as to the benefits for all of this. No one would wish this upon a community. But really, for those of you that find the path to get there, I really believe that Palisades will be a stronger community. It will be a more valuable long-term community. We just have to find the way to get there. Thank you. Questions? We have a few
5
minutes.
minutes.
Yeah.
Steve.
Steve.
I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions. No more than 30-second answer on each, okay? What do you think about owner's rep? You didn't cover owner's rep.
Okay, so there's an industry that was developed relatively recently called owner's representatives, and that is an entity that the owner hires to help manage the architect and builder and all this stuff. For those without a lot of experience in this, we really advise that you consider an owner's rep.
Good.
Find an owner's rep that is collaborative and supportive of your design team. There are also owner's reps that see their role as creating chaos. Avoid that.
One of our first recommendations to the city was to hire an owner's rep, because this is unheard of, and they have. Number 2, the gap you talked about. To bring down costs of construction, what is your opinion when you look at Palisades globally about 5% or 10% of the homes being built prefab or modular, and how much will it save?
Prefab and modular are viable options. We used to do prefab homes. We don't do them anymore. There are 3 types of prefab structures. There's modular, the big chunk that arrives. There's panelized systems, walls, floors, roofs that come in panels that are put together, or kit systems, pre-cut systems that you assemble on site. There are companies out there with systems that are available. Look into them. I would just caution, again, in this desire for the perfect answer, really challenge and make sure those companies are viable and able to really produce a product of a quality level that you are happy with. Go and see their products.
There are companies like Berkshire Hathaway that are doing that now, et cetera, et cetera. My concern is if we don't lower this gap, what you're going to have in Palisades is half the people not coming back. And if you have half the people not coming back, then there will be a new half coming back. Or maybe it's just the Kardashians. Maybe it's just the super rich from other countries. But looking at this gap to make yourself comfortable, because from listening to your speech, which is the best I've ever heard, I feel people saying, well, shit, I don't have any extra money like that. I don't have that in the bank. I don't have reserves for this. I don't have reserves. I don't have the sources. So I'm concerned if we don't, you're going to have a generational change, 100-year change in the makeup of Pacific Palisades. It's going to happen in 5 years. And that's this whole social thing. My last one is, do you believe people should sell now, or should they wait a year? I think they should wait a year, but is there a reason to sell now? If it's just overwhelming?
Well, is there a reason to sell now? If an individual homeowner is looking at a gap and knows for a fact that that gap is insurmountable, they will sell their property. Should they sell now? Well, again, that depends on their situation. Do they at least have enough insurance support for temporary housing for a little bit? We would argue wait as long as possible, because the more time that goes, the more and more valuable Pacific Palisades will become. Right now it's at its low. But over time, as more people build, as more of that infrastructure is replaced, those property values will come back. We believe they're going to come back stronger than they were before the fire. It's just going to be some work to get there, and no one knows how long that will be. Yes?
Thank you. Sorry, 3 questions. Your estimated time to RTI for those that are going to be at that sub 110%.
Question is, the estimated time to get to RTI is a term ready to issue. In other words, getting a set of drawings ready to issue for the general contractor to pull the permit and start construction. Generally, for a smaller single-family home, we would say with the permitting process, with that expedited process, it's probably still somewhere 6 to 10 months of process time. So again, like we were looking at phase 1 and phase 2, doesn't matter. Let's say they take 6 months. We're still talking that they're going to beat you in getting through that process. Now, prefab, there may be products available that may speed that up. All the architectural firms, us included, we're working on what we're calling standard plans. We're working with the city of Los Angeles to get standard plans pre-approved so that you could say, I want model A. It already has a permit. It still has to have some work to adapt it to your site, but that process should be faster, so we may be able to squeeze that down. But then you have to ask yourself, is there enough benefit to just getting through this faster? Remember, the rest of your community is not going to be faster, and you may be the only house up in a world, a sea of construction and all those construction trucks coming up and down the hill.
A couple more, sorry.
Leo, I'm gonna let Deputy Mayor Freeman, who is here with us, get the final word.
Great.
Okay.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Rachel Freeman, Deputy Mayor for Business and Economic Development. Just in response to that question, I would direct folks to take a look at the Mayor's Emergency Order 1, which was issued on January 13th, which has really informed and built off of the great work that the governor's been doing specific to the Palisades, tied to the exemption of eligible projects from the Coastal Act, That has created a pathway for the city departments and the mayor to lead an expedited process to rebuild. And to answer your question, how long will it take to go through the permitting process for a single-family home? All eligible projects, as outlined in the mayor's EO1, will be fully permitted within 30 days. So when you go to the Department of Building and Safety and you have a complete set of plans to which we can provide a checklist for that's actually available, the checklist of what you need for homeowners is on the list. So, on the website. When you go into the Department of Building and Safety with a complete set of plans, all of those permits and clearances will be issued in 30 days for the mayor's EO1.
Wow.
So that ain't bad.
That ain't bad. That is miraculous. Let's hope that really that happens. But just so you know, it typically takes many, many months to get a building permit for a house that is allowed totally by right. So that is fantastic. We support you fully.
I think we stand on that note. This is positive. Okay, thank you. Can we give a final round of applause for Leo Marmol and for Steve Soboroff this morning? Thank you, you guys. And thank you all for